CIS250 data structure.
Okay, so this is our last week of lecture, and tonight we are going to cover quite a few things. We're going to cover about 3 or 4 different subjects in the data structure book, and then we are going to cover Java utilizing a database. So before we cover the database, the one thing that, and I'll put this all in instructions and have it in Joule, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the proper drivers installed on our computer. If we go to the internet, again, I'll have this link out there. There's a thing called the Java SE Development Kit, and if you look over here on the left hand side, there's a thing called JavaDB. Now, JavaDB is a driver that's needed in order to utilize databases. So what you'll do is choose the particular operating system you have, make sure you accept the license agreement, and download that guy. And once you download it, you will need to go and verify that it's there. You can go to the C drive, go to your program files, go to Java, and if you go to the JRE 5.1, oh, wrong one, I was in the wrong file, hold on. To be in program files, Java, and here is the 5.1 up here, and notice I've got this folder called DB. Okay, so what I would do is just go ahead and click up here and copy that particular path, and then when you go into Eclipse and you go ahead and create your project, you can actually do a right click on your project and point to build path. Again, I'll have this all in instructions, and go to configure build path, and you'll go to libraries over here, and you will click add external jars, and this is where you'll then point to that particular library that's got all the different jars in it. And when you get done and click OK, you now will have those drivers installed. Okay, so if we look and looking at the book, the very first thing we have is this thing called the Create Coffee DB. And what Build Coffee DB does is it actually builds a database. Before we do that, let's go ahead and come out here to the book, and if we look at the book, we can see that chapter 16 is all about databases. Well, the first few pages, and you can read this on your own, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview. It's called the Database Management System, otherwise known as DBMS. And DBMS basically says this: I'm going to have a group of data. So here's what you think about. So we've got this thing called a database, and the database is made up of tables, and a table is made up of records, and records are made up of fields. Okay, so let's say, for example, I have an employee record. The employee record has a field. It's got first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, marital status, number of dependents, social security number. It's got all the stuff that you would need for your employee information for each one of your employees. You take each one of those records and they stack on top of each other. You now have a table. So let's say if I've got 250 employees, I'm going to have 250 records, one for each employee. Now I've got a table of just employee data. Well, I might have another table over here that basically has hours worked, rate pay, all that kind of stuff, and they're linked together. And that's the beauty of the DBMS, is we call them relational databases, meaning I can have table here, and they're going to be related by some field. So we might have an employee ID in our employee table, and then I have an employee ID on the record that containing the number of hours they work. And the reason we do that is we might have one department that takes care of the employee table. We got another department that basically records the hours work and the pay rate and that type of thing. And so then they basically, as we run our particular reports or particular queries, it takes these two tables and kind of merges them together. When I'm dealing with employee ABC, it will grab the proper pay rate and information for that employee from each one of the tables, whatever we're trying to relate together, and it brings the data all together into one. So again, you can kind of read that at your leisure. And so we have our job application, and it utilizes it goes through the DBMS to get to the data. Okay. We have JDBC, which is Java Database Connectivity. So that's one thing we have to do, is we have to be able to connect to that database. And some DBMS or some DBs, databases, will have security built into them. So we have to know the logon, we have to know the password, we have to know all of that stuff in order to get to the data. Ours tonight are going to be very simplistic. So in our job application, we might have JDBC classes, which we will actually include, and we will then utilize those classes to maybe use as an abstract, or we may just utilize those classes directly to get to the database information. Again, the great thing about these classes, and where all those classes stored, they're stored in all those jar files that we imported in. The great thing about those classes is they give us the programming ability to connect to those databases, to those tables, to extract fields, to basically build what we need to build in order to get that data. Another language that is out there is this language called SQL. Otherwise known as SQL. You'll hear the term SQL, and that stands for Structured Query Language. And the thing about Structured Query Language is it's a specific language allowing us to build queries. I can basically say, go to that database. Let's say I have a movie database. I can say, go to that database and bring back all the movies that have a runtime of 120 minutes or less and have a PG or G rating, and it will run that query through the structured query language, go to that database, and basically bring back all of the records that basically fall into that particular category, and then display it to us. And that's the great thing about SQL. So on page 1016, we have this thing called Creating the Coffee Database. And if we look at the code, so here is the Create Coffee DB. Now, again, they give it to us, so I'm not expecting you to know how to do this, but so the first thing we do is we create a string, which is called the DB underscore URL, and this is what it looks like: JDBC Derby Coffee DB create equals true. So this is a string, and it's basically going to be split off by those different colons and semicolons and be passed in to this connection. So the very first thing we do, now you notice up here I've got this import java.sql, so all of the proper jar files and all the proper classes are automatically brought in that we need, and one of those is one that's called a connection. So the connection is, we're going to build a specific connection. Now again, if this was a secure database, part of this connection would be the logon and password and that type of thing that we would have to include in order to get into the database itself. So this time we're going to just say connection, and we're going to just call it con. We've got a driver manager, which is again that's one of the classes that's built into the Java SQL, and it says get connection. So this is a method, and we pass it DB URL. We've got drop tables, which says, hey, if these tables exist, go ahead and delete them because we're going to create them brand new. Then it says build coffee table, so this is a method, and we're going to pass it the connection, and it's going to build the table. Build a customer table, and then build the coffee table, build a customer table. So if we look, these are italicized. That tells me it is a method that is built into this particular class. So these methods right here are down below. So I click build coffee table. So we go down here to build coffee table, and we're passing in the connection. Now again, we're going to do a try because we more than likely could get exceptions. We always want to capture exceptions and deal with them and not display gobbledygook to our users. So again, I'm not expecting you guys to know this. We're basically going to create a table coffee. We're going to insert the coffee values. Here's all the different values we're going to place in there. Okay. So here's all the different data that we're going to put in. So it looks as though we're going to have a 1 field, 2 field, 3 fields. We're going to have 3 fields that we are basically creating for this table, and we're putting, again, here's the name of the coffee, here's its item number, and then here is the price of that. Okay, so when that gets done, we're going to say the coffee table was created. If not, we're going to display this message, an error message displaying what happened, what was the error that basically popped up when that happened. And then we're going to build customer table con. So we come down here to the customer table. There we're going to create a name, address, city, state, zip, and we are then going to load that table, the customer table, with values. Is there any more tables? It looks as though we build an unpaid order table. Unpaid invoice table. So if we come down here, we build one more table, and it's the build unpaid order table. So there we basically create a prod num, we create an order date, the quantity, which is a double, and the cost, which is also a double, and it basically then creates that particular table. And it looks as though that table is going to be empty. It has no data at this point. So when we get through, we basically hit this. Now, once we're done with the database, we're not going to do anything more with it. We have to make sure we close that connection, because if we leave it open, it's kind of like open up. You've got your phone, the old phone systems, by the way. You have your phone and you forget to hang it up, and it sets down. Well, guess what? It's going to sit there and beep, 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 because the line is still open. We need to make sure we hang up the phone and close that connection. So, if I run this guy, it pops up down here in my console, and we can see it's checking for existing tables. Unpaid order table dropped, customer table dropped, customer coffee table dropped, coffee table created, customer table created, and unpaid order table created. Now, if I come out here and if I look at my workspace, now I've got 2 out here. If I look at Chap 16, you notice I just have my standard source and bin folder, nothing else. If I go to again, this is Chapter 16 over here. If I go to Chapter 16, you'll notice I have a coffee DB. That's the database. Double click on it, and we have a whole bunch of stuff going on here. Here's a whole lot of different tables and different things going on. So this was all created for us via the Java DB that's included in that those jar files that we have, and it automatically created all of this information. Now, somewhere in here is that coffee DB data. It's in here somewhere. If I double click on one of these guys, I won't be able to let me do it, but if I were able to open it up, I might be able to see some of that data. I don't know. It's probably encrypted in some way that again, if I try to look at a double data, it's going to look like gobbledygook, because again, it's compressed into, it takes like 16 bytes and compresses it down into 2. So again, a lot of stuff's there that we can't see, but just realize that Java can handle it. Okay, so that whole little exercise was just to build our coffee database. It's now got data in the customer, it's got data in the coffee. Okay, so if we come over here, and now we got test connection. So if I look at test connection and I click on and run that particular guy, it comes up and says connection to coffee DB created, and the connection was closed. So we come in here, it looks like I created that same JDBC Derby coffee, and then I did a connection con driver manager dot get connection. So again, this is a method that's part of this particular class. I passed in that DB_URL, and it comes back and it says connection to CoffeeDB created. And that's because I used a try. If this guy got an error, the catch statement would have caught that, and none of this other data or these other lines of code would have been executed. The exception would have been executed, and then it would display the error. And then we close the connection, and then we say connection closed. Not a bad thing to do. Okay, not a bad thing to do is go ahead and print that after you close your connection. So not too bad. So this allows us to take the connection, connect to it. If everything goes okay, we do not hit the catch, and we do not get an exception. Life is good. We know we're able to connect to that database. So, so now we have tables, rows, and columns. And so this is kind of an example of what we're going to, or what we have written to our database already. And again, we've got our description, our product name, and our price. So here's some of the different SQL statements that we can utilize. We've got integer or int, we've got character or char, varchar, which is basically a string, and we have to tell how many characters it is. We have a real, which is a single precision floating point number, which is a float. We have a double, we have a decimal, and we have a date. Okay. Now, the one thing about databases is we do have this thing that's called a primary key. Whenever we relate two tables together, one of those tables has to have a primary key. And the primary key is the key that allows us to relate to the other table. Now, the data on this one, so for example, I have a movie database. I have a table called genre. There I've got comedy, action, drama, western, sci-fi, all the different types of movies that are out there. I'm going to have a key for each one of those guys. Could be letters, could be numbers, however you want to set up that key, you can do that. So, in this table, this is my movie table, I'm going to have a genre field, and that field may only be 2 characters long. Now, in this table, I could have multiple comedy movies, but in this genre table, I can only have 1 comedy. So what I'm going to do is, when I bring back the data, it grabs this genre key, it looks up that key in this table, we get a match, and it brings back the word comedy. So over here my key may only be 1 or 2 bytes long, but over here it's going to bring back the word comedy. So this table, the genre table, since there's only 1 comedy, that key is going to be a primary key field. Over here in this table, when I have multiple comedies, that field is going to be what's called a foreign key. Again, I can have multiple comedies, because again, we can have a whole bunch of comedy movies in our table. Over here I got 1 comedy because I'm bringing back, so I'm looking up the word comedy, bringing back, and loading it. So the primary key, we got some rules. Rule number 1, we can only have 1 primary key. I cannot have any duplicates of that key. I can't have more than 1 comedy. Number 2 is it cannot be blank. So it's got to have something in there. So that's basically what is talked about there on page 1021. Okay, so now we've got this thing called the select statement. So the select statement allows us to query a table. Select these items when this particular thing is true. And so if we just look at the code, let me see if I can find the code. So we got show coffee descriptions. So if I come over here and look at show coffee descriptions, there I can see I've got my DB_URL. There I build my connection. I then have statement. Now notice statement is a class. It's an object. Okay, so it's built into this java.sql. It's called we're going to call the object STMT, and we're going to create it as a con.create statement. So it basically creates a statement from this con object. Then I say string SQL statement. Now this is just a standard string, and it says select description from coffee. So it's telling us, I want you to select something. I'm going to select the description field from the coffee table. Now it's not coffee database, we're inside of the coffee database. That's what this guy is right here. We're connecting to the coffee database. Remember, we've got multiple tables. We've got a coffee table, we've got a forget the person table, and we've got an unpaid invoice table. So we're telling it, I want you to select the description from the coffee table. Sounds kind of funny, coffee table, but and then I say result. So result set, again, that's a class. We're going to create an object called result, which is a result set, and we're going to make that equal to the statement.execute query. So this is a method that is built into the statement class, and we're going to pass in that SQL statement. So it's going to go, I want you to go to the coffee table, look up the descriptions, and bring them back. Now I'm not doing a restrictive query at this point. I'm saying bring back all the records, and then it prints out coffee's found in the database. We do an underscore, and now we have a while statement. So this is our loop. We're going to loop through this thing, and it says while the result, here's our result, while there is a next, we're going to do a system print description. And it's going to say get string, get the description, and then print it. When we get done, we do a con close, because again, we always close our connection, hang up the phone. If this try statement gets an error in any way, shape, or form, we're going to automatically hit this catch, and it will then display an error and show us the message that has given us the error. Okay, so pretty simple, not too bad. So if we run this guy, it comes up, and we can see that we have, here's the coffees found in the database. Here's all of the description fields. These are all of the description fields. Notice we didn't bring back any other fields. We just brought back the one field. So pretty cool, not too bad. Not too bad at all. So now we want to show the description and prices. Okay, so I come over here and I go to show descriptions and prices. And again, this is going to be pretty much the same thing as we saw in the previous one. We got it. We have our DB URL. We build our connection. We get a statement. We then build a SQL statement, which is a string, and it says select description, comma price. This time I'm telling it to go grab description and grab price from the coffee table. I then say result, execute the query using that SQL statement. Again, while result dot is next, as long as I have another record to read, I'm going to then use my printf formatting, which is the 2 decimal places float, and it's going to show a %sign. Forget what % does, but it says we're going to show the description and we're going to show the price. Okay. Well, it's going to take up 25 characters. That's right, 25 characters, and then show the float with 2 decimal places, and we'll round up the float. Okay. So description will always take up 25 characters, even if